Hello and welcome. My name is JJ and today I want to do a black toned sympathy card. So let's get right into it. What I'm going to be using is the Altenew Remember This stamp and die set. Now, there are 4 layers to the flower stamp. Now, this includes the detailed layer as well. I am using 110-pound cardstock. This cardstock is actually from Michael's. Now it is pretty good, pretty heavy, but it isn't a very deep black, so I don't use it too often unless I'm somehow covering it up with something like I'm going to be doing right now. So I'm going to be starting off with the aged mahogany as my base layer. Now I tried multiple different colors and different variations with this stamp set, and the one I liked the most was the one you're going to see here. Now the aged mahogany is a fairly deep color, and once it dries it won't be as bright as you see it here, but I like the texture that the combination of the colors I'm going to be using gives. Now what you're not going to see in this video is after each layer is stamped, I do take the paper away and dry it with my heat gun. Because there are multiple layers, I want to make sure each layer is dry before adding another layer, because I am going to be putting some embossing powder on this stamp. Now moving on to the next layer, I'm going to be using worn lipstick. Now this is pretty bright once it's stamped on the paper, but again, once it dries, it's going to even out a little bit more. Third layer, I'm going to be using spun sugar. This one is quite bright once I stamp it. Now you can see that the other colors have dulled a little bit once dried, which is fine by me, which is the look I'm going for. And there you can see the spun sugar, how bright that really is. But again, once it's dry, it will fade a little bit. So now I'm moving on to my last layer here, and this is the details. Now what I'm going to be doing is I am going to be stamping this with the VersaFine Onyx Black. And once I'm done that, I am going to add some clear embossing powder. And I'll have to admit, I got a lot more detail out of that clear embossing powder than I expected. And I think I've used my clear embossing powder once in the past, and I don't even remember what it was on. But like I said, I was really impressed with how that clear embossing powder really made the lines of this flower pop. So you can see why I wanted to make sure my layers of stamping were dry before I did the final layer of detail for the flower, because I am going to be adding embossing powder. So I'm just heat setting that embossing powder, and I'm just going to get a close-up here of the detail. And like I said, I was really surprised with how bold that was with clear embossing powder on top of the VersaFine. So this is definitely something I need to be doing more in the future. So moving on, I'm going to be using 3 layers for the leaves. The first layer is the peeled paint, and for the second layer I'll be using bundled sage, and the third layer of course is the detail with the VersaFine Onyx Black. Now I'm going to be using the spun sugar just for a border on my front panel, and you can see here it definitely gives you a different look when you use it on black paper. Now for the sentiment, I'm using Deepest Sympathy from the Hefty Doodle Classic Sentiments. You can see I've cut up one of the sentiments. I actually did that in one of my previous videos, and that's the Mother's Day sentiment I cut up. But today I'm not going to be cutting up any sentiments. I'm just going to be using the Deepest Sympathy on my front panel. Now I'm just going to set up my leaves and my flowers just to give me a guide on where I want to put my sentiment. I will be heat embossing the sentiment with a white embossing powder. For obvious reasons, I'm on black. Now I want to mention that the panel I'm using here is actually a 65-pound black cardstock from Michaels, and the reason I'm using this is because it is a deeper black, so it's a solid deeper black as compared to the 110-pound I'm using for the flowers and leaves. And because I'm using a light cardstock as my front panel, there was definitely some warping with the heat embossing. So you can see it here as I line it up with the border I want to use for that panel. So that's something I'll try and take care of when I put the front panel together. Now I'm just going to be lining up my flowers and my leaves to get the position, because I'm going to use that Glad press and seal, and I love using that. That has been such a lifesaver. So I can flip them over all together, get my foam tape on there on the pieces I want with more dimension, and my double-sided tape on the pieces I want flat. So I've got all of that taken care of. I got my foam tape down, my double-sided tape put down. I'm just cleaning up my mess here. And I'll flip that over and line that up on my front panel. Again, that press and seal, if you don't have that in your crafting toolbox, you're missing out, because to be honest, I didn't think I would use it that often or it would be handy in any way. It really is. I reach for it quite often, especially in moments like these where I want to see what I'm doing before I glue it down. Okay, so that's pretty much set up where I want it to go, just making sure everything's down and secure. So now that the panel is done, I'm just taking a look at the warpage I've got here, and I'm going to grab some double-sided tape. And normally with my double-sided tape, I just put it along the border of my panel to line it up, make sure that it's center. With this one, because of the warping, I'm going to add some double-sided tape to the center of the panel. Normally I don't do that, and to be honest, I'm not even sure if this will definitely help. I just want to make sure that this panel sits totally flat, because it is thinner, because there is some warping. I don't want that to be obvious in the final card once it's all done and together. So I'm going to line up my card. I am going to pull this away from the camera for a second just so I can see it in the right light and make sure that it's lined up, because I hate it when my panels don't line up. So I got that lined up. I'm just pressing it down, and I'm just doing it, you can see there, from right to left to make sure that it's flat. Now I've added the panel to a white folding card base, and looking back on it now, I feel like I probably should have used a black one with a white panel inside, but I didn't. I used a white folding card base. It's still beautiful. So for inside of the card, I pulled out my Gina K Mini Wreath Builder stamp set, and pulled one of the stamps out of there and stamped it on the inside of the card. I don't like to leave the inside of my cards blank. I want a little something. Sometimes it's even less than what's in this one, or a smaller stamp, but I do like to put something inside the card just to give it that little extra something. So here's the completed card. We've got black on black. It's a somber tone, still lots of detail to the card, but again, a somber tone considering the sentiment on the card. So I really, really like how this turned out. Okay guys, thank you so much for watching and hanging out with me today. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.